Sunday, 3 in the afternoon. My ex-wife, her new boyfriend, and my ex-mother-in-law came to pick up the last box of her things from my porch. Cheyenne and Trent carried it out to the SUV. Rose stayed behind in the kitchen, she said, to say goodbye properly. She stepped closer, laid her hand on my arm. In her other palm she opened up something, the brass level engraved RD, the one I'd thought was lost for over a year. She set it in my hand. Then she said it, soft, clear, steady. She chose first. Now it's my turn. Then she turned and walked out to the car. I stood in the kitchen a good 15 minutes after their car pulled off my street. The brass level sat on the island, catching the afternoon light, and I could not seem to make my hands move. My name is Malcolm Reeves. I am 37, a structural engineer at Whitcomb and Associates on West End Avenue, 15 years in Nashville, 12 of them tied to the Danvers family, 13 months divorced. I live alone in a small craftsman on the east side of the river. 5:30 most mornings. Black coffee. I read the drawings on my desk before I ever step onto a job site. I signed the divorce papers 13 months ago without contesting anything. No children, no property to split. Rose is the woman who stood in my kitchen. My ex-mother-in-law. She is 57, widowed for 15 years, and she lives by herself in a Cape Cod in Franklin, about 30 minutes south. I met her the summer I was 22, when Cheyenne and I were still students at Vanderbilt, and I drove down one Saturday to help her shore up a cedar pergola behind the house that the termites had gotten into. 2 days of work. A glass of iced tea on the porch. In 15 years of knowing that woman, she never once did a single thing that would have made me think of her as anything but my wife's mother, then my ex-wife's mother. That was all. That was the whole shape of her in my mind. Cheyenne and I are the same age. She's sharp and fast, a real estate agent in Green Hills who has always wanted to move quicker than I could. Trent Merrick is the man she left me for, a condo developer over in Wedgwood, Houston. Heavy watch, loud laugh. She told me the truth when she left. She said she had grown in a different direction. I let her go because I could see the same thing. The work has been the anchor. I was lead on the Cumberland Reach pedestrian bridge from 29 to 32, and I've spent the last 2 years on the Vanderbilt Children's Tower expansion. Wade Corbin sits across from me at the office. He is the only person at the firm who knew my marriage had ended. He teases me about my desk being too clean, that brass level. Rose gave it to me the day Cheyenne and I moved into our first apartment 12 years ago. She said it was so the house could stand straight. RD was engraved on the underside, and I always assumed it was for Danvers, for the family. When I moved out of the apartment I shared with Cheyenne, I looked for it, and it was gone. I figured she had thrown it into a box by accident. I let it go. For the 13 months since the divorce, Rose and I kept a decent distance. She called once a month. She brought a casserole around the holidays twice a year. I fixed her roof 6 months ago after a storm. That was it. Nothing that would have warned me about anything. 2 weeks before that Sunday, Cheyenne had texted me. Sunday we'll swing by for the last box. Bringing Mom, she wants to say hi properly. I said fine. I did not think twice, and so I came back to the kitchen. 3 questions. The first, had she really said it or had my ear built it out of some other sentence? But the brass level was right there in front of me, not imagined. The second, if she had said it, in what sense did she mean it? The sense every person alive would understand at first hearing, or some other sense I couldn't see yet. The third, and the hardest, what was I supposed to do now? Call her and ask? Pretend I hadn't heard? Wait and see if she said it again? What if she didn't? I did not call anyone. Wade would not understand. Delphine is her sister, and I could not put that on her. I put the brass level in the drawer of my desk, closed the drawer, and I sat at the kitchen table until it got dark. I ate whatever was in the fridge. I went to bed at 10. I lay there staring at the ceiling until after 1. Monday, I went into the office like normal. Wade said something and I just grunted. Around lunch, I opened the drawer and looked at the brass level again. Still there. The night before had been real. 3 days after that Sunday, Rose texted me. Just a regular message, like the whole scene at my counter had been an ordinary family afternoon. Malcolm, I've got an extra peach cobbler here. Want me to bring it by? No apology, no explanation, no mention of what she had said. I read the text 5 times. I thought about it for 15 minutes. Then I typed back, "I'll be home tomorrow afternoon." She came at 4 on Wednesday. Glass dish still warm in a tea towel. She sat down at the same kitchen table where, 3 days earlier, she had put the brass level into my hand. She drank her coffee black. She talked about the cedar pergola behind her house. 2 of the vertical posts were rotting, and she wondered if I could come down next season and swap them out. She talked about a new piano student, an 8-year-old girl with hands too small to stretch an octave. She talked about the weather. Not once did she circle back to Sunday. I sat across from her holding my mug and I listened and I did not ask. Because to ask meant I had to be ready for the answer. And I wasn't ready for any of the answers I could think of. I noticed my hand was shaking a little every time I lifted the mug, and I noticed she noticed, and I noticed that she pretended not to notice, and that noticing on both sides was the whole conversation underneath the conversation we were actually having. She stayed 15 minutes. She stood up. At the door she turned and said, "Malcolm, I appreciate you not asking me anything today. You need time. I have time." Then she walked to her car. That sentence, it wasn't a confession, and it wasn't a reassurance. It was a confirmation. She knew she had said what she said on Sunday. She knew, I knew she had said it. She wasn't taking it back. She was just giving me room. I stood on the porch and watched her car turn off my street. It took a while. Over the 6 weeks that followed, there was a string of small interactions, and each one of them had a real reason. She called and asked me to come look at her water heater. I drove down, flushed the sediment, replaced the relief valve. 2 hours of work, black coffee, no mention of anything. The next week she asked me to help her move the upright piano 1/2 meter along the wall because the afternoon light was hitting the keys. I drove down. We moved it, iced tea on the porch. No mention. The week after that she handed me a paperback of Wendell Berry's poems and said Henry used to copy his favorite verses into it back when he was alive, and she thought I might like to have it. I took it home. No mention, but every visit, I noticed a small thing I had never noticed before. She remembered I don't take mustard on a sandwich. She remembered I sit on the left side at the dinner table. She remembered I wear a size 11 shoe the Christmas I married Cheyenne. She gave me a pair of wool socks in exactly that size, and I could not for the life of me remember ever telling her my size. She remembered that I drink my coffee weaker in the afternoon than in the morning. She remembered that I bruise my knuckles on the trim of doorways because I'm just a little too tall for the older houses in Franklin, and every time I came through her front door, she'd say the same soft thing under her breath, "Watch your head." Wade noticed something too. One Tuesday morning in the conference room before anyone else came in, he set a coffee down on my side of the table and said, "Malcolm, whatever you're carrying is your business, but you're clearly carrying something." I told him it was nothing. He shrugged and went to his desk. Mrs. Halloran, the neighbor on the other side of my fence, started staying by the fence a little longer each time Rose left my house. One afternoon she leaned over and said, "She sure has been coming by a lot, Malcolm. Isn't that your ex-mother-in-law?" I gave her a polite answer and went back inside and shut the door a little harder than I meant to. Delphine, Rose's younger sister, came into town at the end of the month. I went over for Sunday dinner. Afterward, I was drying dishes at the sink, and Delphine was next to me with a towel. And she said, plain as day, "Malcolm, can I ask you something straight? Did you know? Rose still has that pencil sketch you did of the pergola 15 years ago, tucked into that Barry book." Page 47. I stopped moving with the wet towel in my hand. Delphine caught herself, changed the subject to the weird, warm October Nashville was having. I drove home that night, and I went straight to the nightstand where Barry's book had been sitting since Rose gave it to me 3 weeks earlier. I opened to page 47. Between the pages, on aged graph paper with 5mm grid squares, was a pencil drawing I had done in soft 2B lead the pergola behind Rose's house 15 years back with my own handwriting in the bottom corner. R.D. Summer of 2011. Whatever the sentence on Sunday was, it wasn't sudden. It was 15 years old. I sat at my kitchen table for an hour with that sheet of paper in front of me and a glass of water I never drank. I started running back through 15 years with a different light on it. The way Rose always plated my chicken from the far end of the table, the seat that wasn't in the draft from the window. The way she never missed a single thesis presentation of mine at Vanderbilt. even the semester after Henry died. The way she stayed quiet the night Cheyenne and I had a shouting fight in front of her in year 7 of the marriage she didn't pick a side. She just poured me a glass of water and sat down next to me. The way, when I flew back from a job site in Memphis with the flu the winter I was 30, she was the one who drove over with soup, not Cheyenne. The way the camping photo on her mantle from Percy Warner Park in 2013 had been cropped. Cheyenne and Henry cut out of the frame. Just her and me under the oak, but I still didn't say anything to her. Because I wasn't afraid of being wrong anymore. I was afraid of being right. Right meant that every belief I had built about the last 15 years had a second layer running underneath it that I had not seen. Right meant she had loved me since I was in my mid-20s, and she had kept quiet through 12 years of my marriage to her own daughter. Right meant that the sentence on Sunday was not a sudden feeling. It was the conclusion of a very long wait. And right meant that it was now my turn to figure out what to do about it. The following Saturday I drove Rose to the Franklin Farmers Market. Real reason. Her car was in the shop, and she needed a couple of pie pumpkins. We walked the whole market for 2 hours. She showed me how to check a pumpkin by the stem. There was a moment, standing by the honey vendor, when the afternoon light caught one side of her face, and I found myself looking at her longer than a former son-in-law should. She turned. Neither of us said anything, but we both knew something had just been named in our heads that neither of us was ready to say out loud. On the drive back, she asked if I wanted to come in for tea. I sat in her front room and looked at the mantel. The cropped camping photo was still there. I did not ask about it. I understood. I drove home that night, opened my desk drawer, took the brass level out. I set it on the sill of the living room window where the streetlight would find it. For the first time in 6 weeks, it wasn't a question. It was an answer I had not yet said out loud. Mrs. Halloran ran into Cheyenne one evening. Cheyenne had come back to pick up a pair of earrings she'd left in the drawer of my living room console. 2 years ago I wasn't home. She still had a spare key she hadn't returned. Mrs. Halloran leaned over the fence and, in her cheerful way, said, "Sweetie, your mama's been coming by a lot lately, about once a week." Cheyenne thanked her, got in her car, sat there for 20 minutes without starting the engine. 3 days later, Cheyenne called me. Her voice was sweet in a way that was slightly off, like she was trying too hard to sound normal. "Sunday, Trent and I are having dinner at Mom's. You gonna be there?" I told her yes, that Rose had been asking me for a couple of weeks to swap out the kitchen outlet, and I hadn't gotten down to it yet. Cheyenne was quiet for 2 seconds and then said, "See you Sunday." I got to Rose's house at 4 that afternoon. I was on my knees under the counter with the outlet cover off when the front door opened. Cheyenne walked in the same cobalt blue dress she had worn the day they came to pick up the box, Trent behind her. Cheyenne looked down at me, kneeling on her mother's kitchen floor with her father's screwdriver in my hand, and something broke behind her eyes. Dinner started polite in a way that hurt to sit through. Rose had made lemon chicken, sweet potatoes, and green beans. Trent was loud about the new condo project in Wedgwood, Houston. Cheyenne laughed on cue at the right places. I ate a little. I answered short. Rose sat at the head of the table with her back straight, and she did not say anything unnecessary. When Rose got up to bring dessert from the kitchen, Cheyenne set her knife down. "Mom, can you come here a minute?" Rose came. Cheyenne stood up. "I want to ask you straight, how many times has Malcolm been to this house since the day we came for the box?" Rose answered without hesitation. 6. Each time for a reason." Cheyenne laughed once, dry. 6 times. Each time for a reason. "That's beautiful." Trent stepped in, and this was where he weaponized what he had. He stood up, walked to the mantel, picked up the framed camping photo, and held it up. "Cheyenne, look at this. I noticed this the first time I came to this house 4 months ago. Your mother cropped you and your father out of a family picture so it would just be her and Malcolm. You don't even recognize the house you grew up in anymore." Cheyenne took the frame. Her hands were shaking, just barely. She looked at Rose. "Mom, explain it." Rose didn't speak. Rose looked at me instead of at Cheyenne. That was the first time I ever saw her lose her composure, not in her words, in her eyes. Trent wasn't done. He walked over to the bookshelf, pulled out the Barry paperback, the same one Rose had given me, and I had returned the week before, and opened it to page 47. The pergola sketch. "Look at this. Your mother has kept this piece of paper for 15 years. This isn't affection for a former son-in-law, Cheyenne. This is a woman in love with your husband. All the way from the beginning." Cheyenne turned to me. "How long have you known about this?" And then the second question, the one that mattered. "The day we came for the box, did she say something to you?" That was the moment I had to choose. Lie to protect Rose, or tell the truth to respect Cheyenne. I chose to tell the truth, but I chose to tell it my way. She said something. I didn't understand what she meant by it until about 3 weeks ago. I'm still figuring out how I want to answer it. Cheyenne started crying, not the kind of crying I'd seen in 12 years of marriage, but the kind of crying of a person who has just realized she lost something she threw away with her own hands. "Why does it have to be my mother, Malcolm, of everyone in this world? Why my mother?" I did not have an answer that would be kind enough to say to her right then. Rose stepped out of the kitchen doorway. She did not look at Trent. She looked at Cheyenne. Her voice was calm in a way that was painful to hear. "Cheyenne, I did not say a word to him while you were still married. I did not say a word for the 13 months after the divorce either. I said what I said to Malcolm on the exact day you formally arrived with someone else to pick up the last of your things from his house. I did not cut in on anything of yours. If you want to be angry at me, be angry. But do not tell me I stole something you threw away." Cheyenne stood still. Trent opened his mouth to say something. Rose turned on him for the first time all night. "Put that frame down. This house is not your stage." Trent set the frame down. Cheyenne walked to the door. Trent followed. On the porch, Cheyenne stopped without turning around and said, "Mom, I need time." Rose said, "I have time." They left. I stood in the kitchen. Rose was still in the doorway. Neither of us said anything for 4 minutes. Then Rose said, "Malcolm, go home. I'll be all right." I did not argue. I walked to the door. On the porch I turned. "Rose, I'm sorry about tonight." She shook her head. "You have nothing to be sorry for. Tonight is a night I've known was coming for a long time." I drove home to East Nashville in silence. 40 minutes of road. When I got home, I sat at my kitchen table without turning on the light. The brass level sat on the living room windowsill, catching the streetlight through the blind, and I let myself look at it for a long time without moving. My phone buzzed. "Cheyenne." I did not pick up. A text came through. "Malcolm, I'm not asking you why. I'm asking you this. Are you going to answer the question my mother asked you on Sunday?" I read it 3 times. I did not answer. I set the phone face down on the counter, and I noticed my hands were steadier now than they had been at the dinner table, which felt like a bad sign, because steady hands meant some part of me had already made up its mind, and had not asked for the rest of me to catch up. The next week I went into work like normal. Wade watched me and did not ask. Thursday morning he set a coffee down on my desk and said, "Malcolm, I don't know what you're carrying, but don't let silence do it for you. Silence isn't as kind as you are." Then he walked off. Friday night Delphine called. "Malcolm, I'm not going to apologize for my sister. My sister doesn't need anyone apologizing for her. But let me tell you something. My sister had a man come courting her the year you turned 30. Decent man, her age. Retired engineer over in Brentwood. She turned him down. I asked her why. She said, 'I don't want to stand next to a man while I'm still thinking about somebody else.' She didn't name a name, but I knew. And now you know too." Then she hung up. I sat with that until 2 in the morning. I stayed quiet for 9 days after that broken dinner, not out of anger. I needed the time to rearrange 15 years of memory around a frame I had not seen before, and to find an answer to the sentence that had been hanging over me for 7 weeks. The Monday of the second week, I drove down to Franklin. I didn't call ahead. I got to Rose's house at 10. She was sitting on the back porch, coffee gone cold, hands in her lap. When she saw me, she stood up. She didn't ask if I wanted to come in. I sat down in the chair across from hers. I said, "Rose, I need to hear this from you, from the beginning." She nodded. She told it without decoration and without excuse. "I understood I had a different feeling toward you the year you were 24. You came down to help me fix a burst pipe in March. When you finished, you sat down on the porch step and you said, 'Your house is solid, ma'am. You don't have to worry.' I was in the kitchen with a dish towel still in my hand, and I understood a thing about myself I had not wanted to understand. You were my daughter's husband. So I did nothing. I didn't tell a soul. I didn't write it down. I kept it inside like a locked room in my own house that I refused to open." She kept going. I prayed your marriage would work. Not because I was noble. Because if it worked, I never had to think about it again. It didn't work, and when it fell apart, I still didn't come to you. I waited. 6 months ago, the roof leaked for real. I called you for real. I made you black coffee for real. But I knew I was borrowing the reason. 10 months ago, I went by Cheyenne's place for some old albums. I saw the brass level in a box she'd set out in the garage to throw away. I picked it up, brought it home, kept it in the drawer of the piano room 10 months. No plan for it. 2 weeks ago, Cheyenne asked me to come with her to your house for the last box. I sat in the passenger seat telling myself, "You're going to say hi properly, Rose, that's all." I believed that. But when she and Trent walked the box out, and I was standing alone in your kitchen, I looked at that island. I looked at you, and I understood that if I let that door stay closed one more day, I was going to die without opening it. I'd polished the level 3 times that week. I brought it in a cloth bag. I already knew. I just hadn't given myself permission to know. What I said to you, I had practiced that sentence in front of a mirror 3 times that morning. I was going to skip it. But when I saw you, I knew I wasn't going to get a second window. My daughter had already chosen. I had waited 15 years for it to be my turn to say a sentence about me, and not about anybody else. I did not interrupt her one time. Her last piece. Malcolm, I am not asking you for anything. I have lived a whole life without needing anyone's permission to love, and I will keep living it that way if I need to. If you want us to only be friends, I'll take it. If you want to not see me at all, I'll take that too. But I'm done pretending. That part I can't do anymore. I sat there a long time. Then I said, Rose, I need to walk. By myself. I'll come back tonight. I stood up. Right at that moment, her phone rang on the porch table. The screen said Cheyenne. Rose looked at me. I gave a small nod, go ahead. She picked up. Cheyenne said something fast on the other end. Rose listened. Then Rose said, calmly, without raising her voice, without any bitterness in it, Cheyenne, I am still standing where I said I was standing at Malcolm's house that afternoon. She hung up. She did not look at me. She set the phone back down on the table. That was the second time the sentence from Sunday was confirmed, this time in Rose's own voice. To her own daughter. I stepped down off the porch. I started walking. I walked past the old cemetery, through Pinkerton Park, along the Harpeth River for 2 hours. I thought about Henry, about Cheyenne, about 12 years of a marriage that had tried its best and had not been enough, about Rose, a woman who had loved me for 15 years and never put the weight of that on my shoulders, about how choosing somebody is not the same thing as betraying somebody else, about how a life can have 2 chapters, and the second one does not have to apologize to the first. I thought about the real question, if I took age out of it, and the mouths of Franklin out of it, if I only asked myself who I wanted to sit next to on a Saturday afternoon for the next 20 years, who was the answer? I already knew the answer before I asked myself. At 7 that evening, I knocked on Rose's door. She opened it. I put the brass level into her hand, handed it back. Rose, I've had this 7 weeks. I'm giving it back until we're both ready to put it somewhere the 2 of us can see it. She held it. I said, I choose you, but I want to go slow. For you, for me, for Cheyenne, for Franklin. Slow. Is that all right? She nodded. No hug, no tears, just a nod, her hand tight around the level. I drove home that night. For the first time in 7 weeks, the house didn't feel silent. It felt quiet, and we went slow. Rose set 3 rules in the first week. 1. I did not come to her house after 7 in the evening for the first 6 months. 2. We ate a meal out with Delphine at least once a month, a third person to witness the decency of what this was. 3. She did not come to my house until 3 months had passed. I agreed to all 3, not because I needed the rules for myself, because she needed them, and because I understood that a woman who had waited 15 years for one sentence had earned the right to set the pace of what came after. The first month we walked. Radnor Lake every Saturday morning. Percy Warner Park every Sunday afternoon. We did not hold hands in public. We did not sit close together on a bench. We walked at the pace of 2 people who were still figuring out how much of the space between them was going to close, and neither of us hurried it. Nobody in Franklin knew a thing for the first 2 months. Cheyenne did not call Rose again after that phone call from the porch. Rose sent her a handwritten letter in the fourth week, 2 pages. She did not apologize for loving me. She apologized for the way Cheyenne had found out and for not being there to tell her herself first. She left it in Cheyenne's mailbox at the Belmead condo on a Tuesday morning. Cheyenne did not answer for 3 months. Wade was the first person I told at the firm in the second month. He listened all the way through, took a long sip of his coffee, and said, "Yeah, I figured that out around the 3rd month. You were smiling different." He didn't ask another question. He never brought it up again unless I brought it up first, and that was the kindest way anyone at that office had ever done anything for me. Mrs. Halloran figured it out in the 3rd month, the first day Rose came to my house after the 3-month rule was up. Mrs. Halloran looked over the fence, didn't say a word, went back inside. 3 days later, she brought over a tin of butter cookies with a small handwritten note that said, "She always did seem like a good one. Franklin is small. News moves by Cookie." In the 4th month, I took Rose out to the Cumberland Reach pedestrian bridge, the first time she had seen with her own eyes the bridge I had spent 3 years on. It was a clear evening in late April. She stood at the east landing, looking at the steel curve arcing off toward the west bank, and she said, "Malcolm, you make things that stand." That was the sentence I had been waiting for and had not known I was waiting for. I did not say anything back. I just walked with her out to the middle of the span, and we stood there while the river went dark under us. In the 5th month, we started rebuilding the pergola in her backyard. I bought cedar from a mill up in Robertson County, drove the truck down with the boards in the bed, 3 weekends in a row. Rose brought iced tea out to the porch, the same way she had 16 years ago. Same pitcher, same 2 glasses. She didn't say the pitcher was the same. I recognized it. We didn't talk much, we just built. The pergola was finished at the end of June, and the first night it stood I sat under it with her, and neither of us said what both of us knew, that we were sitting under a thing I had first built for her when I was a boy, and I was building it again now as a man who had finally understood who I was building it for. In the 7th month, Cheyenne texted me, "Malcolm, I'm not ready to forgive right now, but I don't want to hate my mother anymore. Can you tell her that for me?" I showed the message to Rose. She read it, nodded, did not cry, went into the kitchen and put a kettle on. That was the whole reaction. But she stood at the stove for a long time before she poured the water. In the 9th month, Trent got investigated by the federal government over his Wedgwood-Houston project tax issues. Nothing that touched me. I read about it in the local paper and mentioned it to Rose over dinner. All she asked was whether Cheyenne was going to get pulled into it. I told her no. She nodded and changed the subject. No satisfaction in it. That was one of the moments I knew I had picked the right person. In the 11th month, Cheyenne asked Rose to lunch. Just the 2 of them. Rose came home after, sat on the porch for a long time, didn't tell me a thing. I didn't ask. 3 days later she said, "Cheyenne needs more time, but she's starting." That was all. 14 months after Rose rang my doorbell. We got married at the Franklin courthouse on a Tuesday morning in September. No white dress, no flowers. Delphine stood witness for Rose. Wade stood witness for me. 2 of my co-workers from Whitcomb showed up. Cheyenne wasn't there. She sent a handwritten card to Rose's house that morning. "Wishing you happiness. I'm still learning. Love." See, Rose kept that card in the pocket of her jacket the entire day. We didn't have a reception. We drove back to Rose's house for lunch: lemon chicken, sweet potatoes, green beans. The same menu as the broken Sunday, a year and 2 months before. Delphine teased her, "You've been cooking that for him for 15 years. Now you need paperwork to keep cooking it." Rose laughed a small laugh. "I kept the Craftsman in East Nashville. I lease it out. I didn't sell. We live in the Franklin house. The brass level sits on the mantel between 2 framed photos, the 2013 camping picture, reprinted uncropped, and a new one, Rose and me under the cedar pergola. An afternoon light, neither of us posed. Cheyenne came to Franklin for the first time at Thanksgiving that year. No Trent, they had separated. 4 people at the table. Me, Rose, Cheyenne, Delphine. It was quiet the first 30 minutes. Then Cheyenne asked me about the Cumberland Reach Bridge. I told her about it. Rose poured more wine. Delphine told a story that made everybody laugh. We finished dessert around 9. Cheyenne hugged her mother at the door. She did not hug me, that time hasn't come yet, but she stood half a meter from me and said, "You look good, Malcolm." I said, "You do too." She drove back up to Nashville. Rose and I sat on the back porch after, under the cedar pergola, coffee gone cold in our cups. She said, "I waited on this for 15 years. It came slower than I thought." I said, "Slow, but it came." I sit on our back porch in Franklin on a Saturday afternoon, the brass level engraved RD on the table next to a cup of black coffee. Rose is inside working a Chopin piece for a student next week. The cedar pergola stands over my head, same wood, same hands, built twice, 16 years apart. I don't think of this story as a victory. Nobody won here. Cheyenne lost her marriage and the distance to her mother that she is slowly walking back. Trent lost everything, and that is Trent's business. I lost 12 years of a marriage to a person who tried her honest best in a direction that turned out not to be mine. Rose lost 15 years of silence. What I gained is the understanding that a person who truly loves you will never make you choose between them and their own decency. Rose was decent before she let herself love me, and she stayed decent after. The sentence she said to me that Sunday was not a grab. It was a request for permission, the last one she was ever going to ask herself for, after 15 years of not asking herself for anything. Some people love you by waiting, and when the door finally opens, they do not walk in to take. They walk in only to tell you they were there the whole time. If you had been standing in my kitchen that Sunday afternoon, when that sentence dropped, would you have asked her to repeat it? Or would you have stood still and let it land? And if you had been in Rose's shoes 15 years of silence, would you have said it in the one window you were ever going to be allowed to say it in? If this story reached you, tap like so. I know you still believe in loves that come slow. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And leave a comment, has somebody ever loved you longer than you knew? I read every one.